If there's one thing a Prime Minister should not do, it's connive at a lie. As you know, for months in 2021, senior Labor women in the Senate, the Mean Girls, accused Senator Linda Reynolds of covering up a rape that's alleged to have taken place inside her office. And here they are.
Minister Reynolds does have a responsibility to explain her conduct both to Ms Higgins and also to the Senate.
Just for your information, I don't think you should hide behind Ms Higgins by refusing to answer these questions.
Why has this minister so failed to meet her own standard? Why is she continuing the cover-up?
And that badgering, the relentlessness went on, so much so Linda Reynolds ended up in hospital. But we now know, because two judges have said so after separate legal proceedings, that Senator Linda Reynolds did nothing wrong. That she, in fact, offered her former staffer Brittany Higgins counselling, encouraged her to go to the police and sacked the alleged perpetrator, meaning that the Labor Party weaponised claims of a Reynolds cover-up, effectively destroying her political career, all in an effort to try and bring down the Morrison government. And all of this is now out in the public domain, the political dealings between Labor women and the Higgins camp, the secret texts and emails, the seemingly coordinated hits to Reynolds' reputation, only because an earlier legal process forced out this information. And so have Senators Wong and Gallagher now apologised for weaponising this lie against Reynolds? Have they suffered any adverse consequences for exploiting this lie to advance their own political careers? Well, no, of course they haven't. Indeed, the opposite's true. It's those headlines alleging a Morrison government cover-up that helped propel them into government and into two of the most prominent positions on the new Labor front bench. Two leading women of the left in the Prime Minister's inner sanctum. And yesterday it was his turn to come under scrutiny. In a heated exchange with journalists, first he tried to say that he didn't comment on legal matters, even though this isn't a legal matter anymore, it is no longer before the courts. Then he refused to comment on the failure of senior colleagues to do the right thing and apologise, and finally tried to obfuscate the whole issue away by making it about the rape, which a judge on the balance of probabilities has said did take place, rather than the cover-up that Labor alleged that a judge has ruled most emphatically did not take place. And that, all of it, of course, helped destroy the Morrison government.
Judges in the Supreme Court and the Federal Court have now found there was no political cover-up of Brittany Higgins' rape. Do you accept those findings?
Look, I'm not commenting on legal matters.
But it's not a legal matter. That's not the current case. Should the payout to Brittany Higgins have been more rigorous to protect the reputations of Linda Reynolds and Fiona Brown?
Those things are hands off from the government. I had no role in that as Prime Minister.
Should your senators who led the charge of a Liberal Party cover-up over the Higgins case apologise to Ms Reynolds?
Well, that's not right. I don't accept that characterisation.
What don't you accept?
I don't accept that characterisation.
Your party did accuse the Liberal Party.
I don't accept that characterisation. A judge found that on the basis of probability, a rape occurred.
This is so typical of Anthony Albanese. When under pressure, he adopts this "who me" approach, as if it's got nothing to do with him. Well, obviously it does. On the Prime Minister's comments yesterday, Linda Reynolds has now put out a statement saying, and I quote, putting aside his complete failure to grasp the findings of two separate judgments of superior courts of this country, yesterday demonstrated either a complete lack of understanding of his government's role in the settlement of Ms Higgins' claim against me, or a blatant lie. And of course, not only is he, as Prime Minister, the man who stood by and watched this all and stood to gain the most by the orchestrated takedown of Reynolds, but back in 2021, he himself made much the same false allegation that his Mean Girls were making in the Senate. Here's an ABC report from February 19, 2021, where the now Prime Minister said, and I quote, "It's very clear that Ms Higgins was made to feel, according to her own account, was made to feel that there would be consequences for her career if she pursued the matter." Now, just because he's citing Higgins' own story doesn't mean he's himself not owning as he is, and indeed amplifying the false allegation that Linda Reynolds somehow tried to stop a rape victim telling her story in order to protect the government, that a job was threatened. Honestly, in this whole matter, the behaviour of those who became senior ministers in the current Labor government absolutely stinks. First, Senators Wong and Gallagher leapt on the Higgins story that she'd been supposedly intimidated and threatened out of taking her allegations to the police. Then they weaponised that against the Morrison government, with Anthony Albanese himself their willing accomplice. And finally, after they'd won office, thanks in part to the moral trashing that they'd unfairly handed out to Reynolds and the other Higgins employer, Senator Michaelia Cash, the then Attorney General Mark Dreyfus, well, he abruptly closed out the compensation claim Reynolds, of course, was fighting hard on, and gave away a $2.5 million plus payment to Higgins. Money that, given my long experience with government payouts to staffers, has the real stench of hush money to it. Now, this is where the opposition needs to keep probing. This is where the government itself must come clean. Why did Dreyfus rush to take over and then settle this case against Reynolds' objections? Reynolds was trying to protect the interests of the Commonwealth and her own reputation. Dreyfus instead couldn't pay off Higgins fast enough, settling her claim in around 24 hours after mediation, and in a move I find simply unprecedented, blocking Linda Reynolds from participating in a legal action involving her. As I said, this was a $2.4 million payment, something I have never, ever seen the like of. Was it some kind of reward? If Senators Wong and Gallagher had any real concern for Higgins, they'd spare her more public controversy over this case. Now, all credit here to the Australian newspaper, and in particular to the columnist Janet Albrechtsen, for their dogged pursuit of the truth. Linda Reynolds is a former Army brigadier. She is now a retired senator, and she is owed at a minimum an apology from these women and the Prime Minister. We as taxpayers are owed the truth about a multi-million-dollar payment to Higgins. And if integrity means anything left in Australia in public life, then the public deserve the resignations of both Penny Wong and Katie Gallagher. But I'll leave the final word with Linda Reynolds herself, who has said, the truth will surface and the Australian public will be able to form their own views about the transparency of the Labor government's process after seeing the exhibits for themselves when this matter goes to trial.